and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Newsmax Now.
It's good to have everybody rejoining us for another hour of programming here on Newsmax Now. First, we're going to talk about this new Air Force weapon. They're putting the final touches on plans for what some are calling a super weapon. Interesting stuff here. Let's talk more about it. It's a missile that can strike a computer and knock it completely offline and destroy it. According to a magazine called Flight Global, the Air Force picked Lockheed Martin's Joint Air-to-Surface Missile to carry a new kind of warhead. It can knock out electronic equipment like ones you might find on nuclear facilities. It would also use high-power microwaves to fry computers, much like an electromagnetic pulse generated by a nuclear explosion might do.
The FBI investigates a threat made against a flight from Taiwan that landed in LA yesterday. Officials are keeping quiet about the actual nature of that threat. They will only say it happened over the phone. That threat comes just a day after at least a half a dozen other threats were made against flights at airports, including New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, but none of those turned out to be credible.
Another Republican may throw his hat into the presidential race. Former Senator Rick Santorum says he has a big announcement that he's making today at 5 p.m. Eastern Time from his hometown in Pennsylvania. He's going to announce whether or not he's running for president. He will join an already crowded GOP field. We could have some other announcements coming up very soon as well. Santorum last ran for the job back in 2012 and lost out on the nomination to Mitt Romney. Attorney General Loretta Lynch announces bribery and corruption charges against FIFA soccer officials.
I think that FIFA has a lot of soul searching to do as it tries to essentially monitor itself and improve the way in which it does business. And so the decisions on how those games are awarded and whether they go forward or not is really up to that particular body.
This comes with everything else the DOJ is working on right now. 14 officials have been arrested. They're accused of taking more than $150 million in bribes. Swiss police actually arrested 7 FIFA officials. They are awaiting extradition to the United States. Kentucky Senator and presidential candidate Rand Paul is not pleased with a few of his colleagues. During his faux filibuster last week against the renewal of the Patriot Act, fellow Senator Lindsey Graham was spotted apparently rolling his eyes. Paul says that kind of reaction is insulting to members of the military.
Now in Texas, Dallas officials say there's a break in a dam in the southern part of that city. They're warning residents right now to leave the area. Officials issued a voluntary evacuation. This comes after a record amount of rain fell on Texas. At least 5 people are dead due to all that flooding.
At this time, all of us, our prayers are with the families of those who have lost loved ones, or the family of those whose loved ones are missing, who are praying that somehow hope remains.
At least 2 people are still unaccounted for from the flooding that happened on Monday. And those same storms are also being blamed for a deadly tornado that ripped through a northern Mexican city. At least 13 people died as a result and dozens more are hurt. Officials say in that city alone, about 750 homes were damaged. The area sits just across the Rio Grande from Del Rio, Texas.
The chair of the Senate's Finance Committee now demanding answers after an IRS cybersecurity breach. Senator Orrin Hatch says taxpayers need to know the information they send to the IRS is secure, but apparently it's not. Yesterday we learned about a hack where thieves hacked into the IRS computers and stole private information on about 100,000 people. The IRS says it is notifying everyone affected. New York's Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo faces record low approval ratings. According to a new survey from the Siena Research Institute, only 41% actually approve of the job Cuomo is doing. The majority, 59%, disapprove. The new numbers mark a drop of 8 points from June of 2014. Cuomo's favorability rating, that's the measure of how voters feel about him personally, has been taking a hit lately. It's dropped to its lowest point at 53%. Well, things not looking so good for Andrew Cuomo in the Empire State right now.
Yeah.
Well, at least the timing worked out for him. Did I not turn this microphone? I guess it is on.
Is it not?
Sorry, I had a different mic to use today, and it has a little different tone.
Well, we can
with
hear
it.
you loud and clear.
Good.
We got the
Good.
okay, everybody? Okay.
We haven't gotten the high sign from the control room, so that's a good thing.
Steve hasn't run out here checking your mic, so I think we're in good hands.
As John was offering those numbers from Siena,
Yeah.
it's all a matter of timing. To have those numbers now, not so much of a big deal. To have them just before an election last November, that's when Governor Cuomo would have been worried. And so you see the rise and fall and the vicissitudes of public opinion.
All right, I think we're going to talk about Rand Paul now and about how his view on foreign policy is going to impact him in 2016. I believe we have a clip queued up. Let's take a listen.
ISIS exists and grew stronger because of the hawks in our party who gave arms indiscriminately, and most of those arms were snatched up by ISIS. These hawks also wanted to bomb Assad, which would have made ISIS's job even easier. They created these people. ISIS is all over Libya because these same hawks in my party loved Hillary Clinton's war in Libya. They just wanted more of it, but Libya is a failed state and it's a disaster.
Hillary Clinton's war in Libya, and the way he talks about hawks, a little bit concerning, JD?
Well, I think it's going to be tough for Rand Paul in terms of trying to say that Republican Party hawks in the United States created ISIS. I don't think that is the case at all. I think ISIS obviously grew of its own volition. And I think all of those, the danger for Rand is that he in 2016 becomes like the so-called San Francisco Democrats in 1984. Jeane Kirkpatrick talked about them as a Democrat who later switched to the Republican Party because she said their answer was to blame America first. Now, I understand what Rand is doing. He's taking aim at John McCain and Lindsey Graham. But a failure to specify that, if he's trying to broaden that out to others vying for the Republican nomination, I think he runs the risk of alienating the very people he wants to attract in Republican primaries and caucuses.
And I think Bobby Jindal has already come out blasting Rand Paul for these comments today as well. And I know there's a very interesting interview you have coming up on the same topic tonight on Newsmax Prime.
Well, our good friend Patrick J. Buchanan always checks in, and though Pat's got a book out now about Dick Nixon, the greatest comeback, I always think about a conservative memoir Pat wrote in the early 90s, Right from the Beginning. And John, you and I have talked off the air about how in the fullness of time on a variety of issues, Pat Buchanan was the guy warning us, especially about the border and the culture wars, and sadly those warnings went unheeded. It'll be interesting. You'll want to hear what he has to say about Rand Paul. That's why we want you to join us at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, and if you live in time zones twixt and tween, make your own calculations. That's what be one of the things
That's
we
a
have.
safer thing to do. And actually, to make sure people tune in, we prepared a brief preview of
good.
what they can hear tonight. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
And I also agree with Rand to this extent. There's no question about it that the armed and the equipment in Mosul, the enormous armaments, American armaments, some of which we're bombing now, quite frankly fell into ISIS's hand because of the collapse of the Iraqi army.
Well, maybe it's because of Pat Buchanan's experience and his body of work on this topic that it doesn't sound so tinny when it comes from him. Maybe because he's not running for president, but why can't Rand Paul seem to articulate the issue the same way that Pat Buchanan can?
Because, and look,
Because he's running.
well, not only that, but it's interesting because in the same appearance this morning, Rand Paul criticizes Jeb Bush for not being conservative enough. Rand runs a real risk for broader appeal to the party. His dad had the Paul backers in the previous two presidential cycles, very vocal, very passionate, really didn't amount to more than about 6% of caucus goers and primary voters. So the challenge is, and maybe things can change, we talked about the ups and downs of politics.
Still very early.
Does Rand Paul's conservatarian approach win him more votes now? He has taken pains to separate himself from the legacy of his father. The first foreign trip Rand Paul took upon his election to the U.S. Senate was to Israel, so he would not be perceived as anti-Israel. But it's going to be very interesting to watch how he tries to navigate this, and it's just ironic when he slams Jeb Bush for not being conservative enough, and then he speaks out against what has been the commonly held preference of the party. Going to be a real challenge for him.
And of course, this opens the door for his comments about Israel that have come back to haunt him time and time again, to come back out again about whether or not the U.S. should be supplying aid to Israel, military aid specifically.
Well, the one thing you find out in Congress, courtesy of the Camp David Accords that Jimmy Carter drafted, there is a standing payment in the billions of dollars to Egypt and Israel. Right. I don't want to call it protection money, but basically that was part of the deal, and it said that future Congresses are not constrained. Well, that agreement basically put Congress on the hook.
Watch
More tonight.
JD.
That's right.
Tonight, Newsmax Prime tonight. Can I do it?
Sure.
8 Eastern.
Yeah.